Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal Live. We say Jazakallah to you, the viewer, for staying with us. We also would like to thank Luqman for bringing us the first 1 hour of the show. Now, to the story that has been making headlines this week. On Monday, South Africans watched with shock and disbelief on social media when police officers from a VIP protection unit assaulted 3 civilians on the N1 highway. Now, many of these VIP units, which transports ministers, are always wanting the right of way, and the civilian drivers have no choice but to move for them. It also raises the question of legal rights offered to civilians, but also the limitations of its abuse by these VIP protection units. Joining us now is Advocate Stefanie Fick, who is from the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. Advocate, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, it's only my pleasure.
Right, Advocate. The question is, you're driving on a highway and these VIP protection units come and they're telling you to move and they're acting as bullies. Let's start legally. How can they force this to happen, and what is your rights as a civilian in a situation like this?
So I would like to answer it first practically. My advice to anybody that's confronted with a VIP protection unit, and we're talking about the police VIP protection unit, so I'm going to accept this car that is driving behind you, wherever has got blue lights and sirens, that you move out of the way. They have, in terms of the National Road Traffic Act, the police, and is like ambulances and so forth, can ignore certain traffic regulations, and for example, Section 60 make provision for them to also exceed certain speed limits. But there's a big but and a proviso. They can only do this after, every time they do this, they have to consider the safety of other motorists. So now come back to your original question about, are you basically forced to give way to the SAPS, because that is what they are if they are the VIP protection unit. And my answer still remains, I can give you good advice, get out of their way. If they do drive like maniacs, please report them, but stay out of their way, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you might be in an accident, etc. Because yes, they can be prosecuted for reckless and negligent driving. They can be prosecuted for culpable homicide or murder or whatever the case may be. But prevention, in my view, is really better than cure. You don't want to put yourself in that in that position. So err on the side of caution. Go away and let them drive past. If they do drive reckless and negligent, rather report them.
Now, Advocate, I had a situation like this about 3 years ago where it was traffic, also on the N1, but going towards the south side. And these VIP protection units, very similar, with the blue lights, said, hey, you better move. So they were like hooting one way and stuff like that. So I then got advice after this, because as I was a bit angry at the time, because I thought, hey, listen, why are these guys doing this? I then got advised that the National Road Traffic Act, as you mentioned, Section 60, allows for it to happen. But does this allow for them to be bullies on the road? Because what we saw on Monday was clear bullying tactics.
Oh, yeah. Now, what happened on Monday, I actually want to say, and I think you'll agree with me, don't care what the excuse was. You do not park your car in the middle of a lane on the N1 highway because the car was sort of standing that cannot be in the best interest of other motorists on a highway. And then secondly, you don't go and beat up people. Let's accept for a moment that the complainants in this instance did something. They pointed a firearm, or let's think, outside the box, something bad that they did to these VIP protection unit people. Then you arrest them. You don't bully them. You don't assault them. The one person looks unconscious. That is definitely, there's no justification that I could think about for their behavior. Now, that's wrong. They can be, now obviously there needs to be investigation, but they should be arrested. There should be an investigation, and then they should stand trial. And whatever justification they think they have, they can tell that to a court of law. Now, that type of bullying was never the intention of the legislator to excuse them of. They still need to drive in the best interest of other motorists. They have to keep the safety of other motorists always in mind. And then this type of bullying tactics, no, unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, because it just seems as if Section 60 of that very same act is being abused right over here. And that's where the next question comes in, Advocate Fick, is how do you have that balance between where it's necessary, because as you mentioned, you've got ambulances and police officers who are, of course, on national duty, whatever the crisis may be, but then you juxtapose it to, of course, the VIP protection units who say, all right, here's something lovely within this section, let us go ahead and abuse it.
Yeah. So let's just think about this. I think there is an enormous trust deficit when it comes to, government, and when it comes to, for example, the SAPS. Now, firstly, if you think about the crime rate in South Africa, the police has got a job to do in order to safeguard our safety. That is their duty. Now, one would. They also have a duty to do their job to the best of their ability and in the best interest of everybody else. Now, they do have the right to, for example, exceed the speed limit, but they can't abuse that power. And unfortunately, we are discussing the fact that they are most probably abusing their powers. And you know where the problem lies? I think it's in leadership. We need ethical leadership. We need we need police officer that is educated in what they need to do, that's got a love for the job, that there's enough of them so that they can actually do something, with the sheer crime wave that is hitting South Africa. And that all being said, normal circumstances, as a law-abiding citizen, I think you would agree with me that you would like to make space for someone that's doing their job. But now you start questioning. Paul Mashatile, our deputy president, wasn't in the car. So why on earth were they speeding if they were speeding? And why did they find the need to pull someone over and do that? It's just incomprehensible.
Yeah, and you mentioned something important there, Advocate, about trust deficit with leadership, because I think we're void of leadership right here in South Africa. And what we saw on Monday is just a clear indication where we're living in a state where, if you don't agree with anything government-wise and you have this ability to go ahead and abuse that power, Monday was just a clear example of that.
Yeah, we can't. I think I heard someone talk about this, and they actually, this is like a police state where the police can do whatever they want. And this would have probably gone unnoticed if it wasn't for the brave individual that actually filmed this. And, what's also sad is that, you could see how many people actually stopped and wanted to help. Because I think that ultimately people, are scared of the police. And we can't have that happen. So it is extremely important that there's transparency in this process, that these police officers are held accountable, that we as South Africans are being kept in the loop as to what is happening, that they are now, removed, but that they are arrested. I mean, if me or you did this, I think we would have been in jail already. So why do we have different standards for someone that clearly abused a trust relationship we're supposed to have with police and power? They abuse the power that they have.
One final question, Advocate. 4 members have been suspended. Okay, so they haven't been arrested as yet. There's still a probe happening from IPID. I'm trying to think of what could happen, because I don't know whether they're going to actually be fired. And that's the scary part, because if they do get back their jobs, we don't know whether they're going to be doing this again in a moment as they were on Monday. So from a legal perspective, Advocate, what can the victims do to try and have some sort of justice given their way, because we may not get the full justice, but something which can at least have them protected going forward.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't think of something that will protect them. The only thing that will protect them and future victims is if we make a plan with the absolute, I want to say, lawlessness of what we've seen happening in on that highway. We cannot allow that to happen. So leadership needs to step in. And I think it is high time that they show society that they are, they're not just talking about, yes, we will investigate and hold to account, that they actually hold to account. I would expect them to be be arrested very, very soon if we follow the normal route of when something like this happens. In terms of retribution and what can the complainants do? I do believe that they already have legal representation, and I believe that their attorneys will give them the best advice. But hopefully, and probably what will happen is that they will sue the police department. And ultimately, although they are allowed to do that, and hopefully they get, something out of this ordeal, who will be responsible? Ultimately, it's the taxpayer. So I think there needs to be another level that the money should come from the policemen themselves. In other words, don't, at the end of the day, take the money from the fiscus that can be used for something else. Take it from the people that actually, made themselves guilty of such a horrible, horrible crime. And can I just say this? I think I speak on behalf of so many people. I really hope that the victims get some sense of peace after this dramatic experience, and that, again, I want to say, I think leadership of the SAPS owes them, the general public, an apology for what happened and show us that they will hold the perpetrators to account.
Advocate Stefanie Fick would like to say thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV.
Only my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Advocate Stefanie Fick from the organization Undoing Tax Abuse, talking to us about just the legality with regards to what the VIP protection unit has, but also the legal rights that us, the citizens, have when they are, of course, approaching us from any part of the road. Interesting to see what will happen with regards to those victims that had to go through that ordeal on Monday. After the break, I speak to Aziz Yunus, who will be talking about Israel's latest attack on the Jenin camp, and now they've moved into Gaza. Do stay tuned.